Coping during COVID-19 is hard. Physical distancing, wearing masks, not seeing loved ones in person. Things don't feel normal. And we all have different challenges. But we know staying home is still saving lives. Remember, it's okay to ask for help if you or someone close to you feels physically, emotionally, or financially stressed. Tap now or visit loudoun.gov/coronavirus and explore the resources available to you.
You are listening to New Theory Radio.
Hello and welcome to another edition of New Theory Radio, here live on News Talk, Sauga 960 AM. My name is Nav Nanwa, I am your host, and this is our special theories on allyship, community support, and change episode stemming from the recent racism and injustice events that have been taking place in the US and that have been affecting the world. I do want to keep this intro short because I do want to get into the conversation. I have joining me radio personality Mastermind, as well as music journalist Anupa Mistry. And then a little later in the show, we are going to be introducing our New Theory Radio Spotlight, where we will have musical artist and Sauga native Junior T joining us to talk about his wonderful album, Studio Monk. We are going to take a quick commercial break. Yes, we're doing things very quickly on this week's episode because I do want to get into the conversation. And then when we come back, we will be chatting allyship, community support, and change with Mastermind and Anupa Mistry here on News Talk, Sauga 960 AM.
You are listening to New Theory Radio.
And we are back here on New Theory Radio, here live on News Talk, Sauga 960 AM. My name is Nav Nanwa. I am your host. It's no secret that we're all still reeling from the horrible events of May 25th surrounding the death of George Floyd in Minneapolis, involving police officer Derek Chaffin and 3 other officers a part of the team. And whether it's news, social media, or even conversations with family and friends, it seems that enough is enough, and the time for action is right now. But a lot of the conversations I've been having this week, especially with those that are close to me, is really around what does the right type of allyship look like? What does community support look like? What does change look like, specifically when it comes to other POCs and them being able to assist our Black brothers and sisters during this turbulent time? And it's an honor right now to have the 2 following individuals on New Theory Radio, 2 people I respect greatly to join me in this conversation. I'll start with the person on my left. She is a writer, producer, host with previous bylines involving The Fader, The Guardian, Vogue. She's also done amazing content with the Red Bull Music Academy, as well as out in New York. And I'm very honored to finally have her on one of my shows, because I've been trying to have this person on a show of mine for the last 5 years. And I think this right here is one of the most important conversations I'll ever engage in. So I'm glad she's joining me. And that is Anupa Mistry. Anupa, thanks so much for making the time.
Sorry. Hey, how's it going?
It's okay. It's okay.
It's a little weird. We're social distanced, you know?
I know. I don't have a conversation in this studio, but it's okay. And then to my right, I have a DJ, radio host, someone that I think is a true authority when it comes to just Canadian hip-hop. He is an industry vet with over 30 years of experience, and he's getting his George Clooney on with his hair right now. It is Paul Fahar, a.k.a. Mastermind. Mastermind, thanks so much for making time for New Theory Radio.
Oh, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
So I want to take you guys back to May 25th, and I'd love to get your perspective right now as to mentally how are you feeling, and a lot of that has to go with, number one, the actual event of George Floyd's death, but even just 2 weeks after, where's your mental capacity at right now when it comes to this issue? And maybe Paul, will begin with you.
In a current state of mind, I'm kind of exhausted. It's such a heavy it's heavy just in all areas of it, you know. And going back to the actual day, it's gonna sound messed up, but it's like there's almost a sense of I don't want to say numbness to it, but I've seen this so many times that you see it and you're like, oh, here we go again. It's not like when we saw Rodney King, back in '92, it was one of those rare instances that something got captured on film. Yeah. So it was something like, oh my God, we know it happens, but we've never seen it. And since then, and especially within the last 10 to 15 some odd years, we've seen a lot of it. And because, nothing happens, there's so many acquittals and there's so many, not even charges being pressed and so on and so forth. You're just like, it almost goes by and you're like, yeah, okay, when's the next one? It's like, you sit there and you want to hope that, oh, this will be the time where something actually happens and change happens. And every time the instance before this, in my brain, I've always said, okay, now it's going to happen. It's going to, the fight back is going to, push back is going to happen. And then it does sort of, and then it does, and it dies off or whatever. And then there's even worse, retributions and stuff. Like, if we really want to dig into all of the, the stuff that's happened with different instances of police brutality and stuff that's happened towards black people, like there's always this thing that happened after the thing that happened that was directly related to the thing that started it. And so not to say that I'm immune or numb to it or whatever, but it's just one of those things where like I saw it and I was like, here it's another one. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's infuriating. Like sometimes I have to, even currently, my timeline is showing it's showing repeats of things that have happened over the last 5-6 years. They'll see something that people will be like, oh, this is just happening. And it's like, no, this is from 3 years ago, or this is from 2 years ago. And it'd be something that I've seen 3 or 4 times, and I can't keep watching it. It's just, it's and I have a lot of black friends, and it's basically PTSD to them.
Yeah.
Like watching it is just, you feel for them, you know what I mean? And it's infuriating. It really is infuriating.
Anupa, what's your mental capacity like right now?
Today, pretty okay. But at the beginning, or like definitely last weekend, when you first emailed, and up until midway through this week, I was like, and unlike both of you, I'm not on Twitter, so I was overwhelmed, even though I was like not, I didn't have that input, but. For me, I think, I heard the news about George Floyd's death. I did not see the video. I don't watch those videos. But what really kind of changed, I think, like the tenor of what I was feeling and what people around me were feeling was then the news of Regis Korchinski-Paquette's death. Yeah. And that, I think for me, like just in everything, it's I always think about like the local context, and I think like there's some important conversations that are now coming up about the ways in which Canadian institutions and Canadians in general tend to turn a blind eye to racism in Canada, especially anti-Black racism in Canada. Because they're able to say, well, like that happened there, like this doesn't happen here. And so for these two incidents to happen like so closely together, I think it really, I think it just really changed it. I think it just was able to, in a weird way, like bring people together. Like it's almost like this is like a time when people are able to and have the capacity, we're living in this pandemic world where like unless you have to go outside and work, like for the most part, you know, our lives are shut down, right? Like we're not going to parties, we don't have like these active social lives. And so in some ways, I think there is the space for people to be able to put two and two together. On top of that, Ahmaud Arbery. On top of that, the news about the way that COVID has been affecting like Black and Latino communities. So I think like there's just a lot more space for like information to kind of, for people to kind of connect the dots in a way that's like super important, you know? Yeah, so I feel better today, and I think like people are starting to like kind of come out of the other side and like are able to have these kind of adjacent conversations. I think like the interesting thing for me that I'll share is, I shared it on Instagram this morning, is I went out for a walk in Hyde Park this morning. And like I walk in the park pretty regularly, and today like 5 white people like made a point of like looking at me and saying good morning, and that never happens. And I posted about it, and the amount of people who are like, my white neighbor like gave me a dining room set, like this white person did this for me, like white people are kind of coming out like and I don't know, being nice or something like that.
It's like white sensitivity. Like I've kind of noticed a little bit of that too. Like the area I live in is pretty diverse, but I was with my daughter on my porch, and neighbors I never talked to just came by and were like, "Hey," and sure, like we'll take it.
I mean, like I'm not like gonna be mad about it, but it's like I also did want to like make a point of like saying it, because I'm like, I just like want people to know that like in doing the right thing, it's also like I see you, like we see what you're doing, you know, and it's not just like we have to be like, oh my God, thank you so much for being nice to me finally. It's like there's so much talk about institutions and the ways that they want to make changes, and you know, like the ways that they're trying to be accountable to their Black staff and this, that, and the other, and it's like cool, but I think a lot of people are really wondering like what that's actually going to look like, you know. And so, and I know, you know, from my friends who are working like full time right now, they're having a lot of hard conversations with their white colleagues, whether they're Black or whether they're other, you know, brown people, whatever they might be, but they're having these really hard conversations with their coworkers who are like, oh my God, like freaking out. And so I think like that's kind of where my head is at now. Like, okay, people are, you know, you're surprised, you're seeing Trudeau kneeling and like saying the words anti-Black racism in Parliament, and you're like, okay. I feel a little bit like, I'm naturally cynical, I think, and a little bit suspicious, though. So I'm just like, okay, like, but what does this actually mean? You know?
Well, that's probably the journalist in you, right?
Yeah.
But like, and I think it's totally fine to hold people like that accountable, because I work corporate during the day, and to your point, the conversations that I've been a part of, or even just the sensitivity lens that people are now putting on different things that we're working on when it comes to campaigns and anything else that's outward communication, like everyone's on high alert. Like everyone is just super scared, and the ones that are super scared and super nervous are the ones who are not POCs, because they're just on eggshells. Like they don't know what to do and what to say. And yeah, this week for my career, I must say, was definitely one of the more eye-opening weeks of my entire life.
I can't even imagine.
Yeah. But I do want to go back to what you had said when you brought up Regis Krasinski-Paquette. Even with like that same day on May 25th was when that Chris Cooper stuff had taken place.
Right. Yeah.
And what made that situation even worse for us is the fact that Amy Cooper went to Waterloo University. So to me, I think that was the first instinct where right away, living in Canada, you we're reminded that this stuff, like these ideals do exist, or these things do happen from people that are from here. And then when the Regis Krasinski-Paquette situation happened, I think that's when people really, like, that's where it brought it very locally, and that's where I think really hit a lot of people inside was, whoa, this isn't just a U.S. thing. This just literally happened in our backyard.
And it's interesting, though, because, like, DeAndre Campbell was killed by the police, like, at the beginning of April in Brampton. Yeah. You know what I mean? And I think there's a different visibility that, like, some of the Brampton and GTA, outer GTA cases get compared to things that happen in Toronto. Sure. But, you know, like, so, I don't know. there are people who are smarter than me and people who are very much more involved and engaged than me who are able to kind of make the connections to all of this. But like just the timing of the way all of these things happened, I'm sure someone will make a fascinating TV movie about it, or straight to Netflix movie about it one day.
Yeah.
It goes back to my whole point about being numb to it, because look how frequently those things were happening. It was almost like they were on top of each other.
Yeah.
And you just be like, here it is again. Here it is again. Oh, look. Oh, there it is again. And it's like, it doesn't matter how loud you scream, except for right now. It seems that finally some of the screaming, it's, I saw a sign today, during protests like these, we see some of the most creative and amazing signs. And, I saw one today, and, I know we're on the radio instead, but the sign basically said, you effed with the wrong generation.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
And it's almost like we are really fed up, man. It's like,
yeah,
it's got to change. It really does. And it's either y'all going to change it or we're going to change it for you. And, they clearly are doing everything in their manifested playbook to help stop the change, because they don't want it to change. You know what I mean? Like, they want to hang on to that power structure that's been there for hundreds of years. And we don't want that no more. We don't. It's gotta change.
Yeah. I feel like the biggest change that I've seen, and this is what I really wanted to focus on a lot during this conversation, is being like, it's funny. Like, I would say that in the last 2 weeks, specifically being a South Asian male, I've seen people try to make this situation relatable to their own struggles, which to me has
what
now,
do you mean?
Like I've seen people who've chimed in about, and I'm admittedly, I've been guilty of that too, and I actually had to go back and fall back on a tweet that I put out. But like, I've seen people say, they don't want certain people in certain areas, and then someone else who's not black will comment, whether they're South Asian or Asian, will say, yeah, my experience is the same. And I think the relatability factor is definitely there. But then when you pull back, when you peel it back, I think a lot of this has really been the conversation on social when it comes to what South Asians or the Asian community can really do for Black Lives Matter, is that no matter what, there are certain differences between the struggles that we face and the struggles that population faces.
Oh, absolutely.
And I think there's been a little bit of just learning there for a lot of people who, again, one other example I use is there was, 1984 Sikh genocide. There was an anniversary that took place. There was some people online that were using that to combat any conversation around Black Lives Matter and using all lives matter to that context. I had to quickly delete those people off Facebook because I just didn't want to see it. But there is a lot of that ignorance, unfortunately.
You need to get your Facebook keyboard fingers ready and go in there, man.
I just delete.
That's exhausting too. Like, I'm not
It is, yeah.
here to debate people, man. Like,
I know.
If you are not on the same page as me when it comes to this particular stance, get the fuck out of my life, man. I don't care about you.
Well, I don't mean to take over now, because I feel like...
No worries. This is an open conversation. Don't worry.
But one thing I was wondering, like, Mastermind, about, like, your... Because, like, this is something that I think about a lot. Something that, like, I've been very fortunate to have colleagues, like, to talk about. But, like, I really wanted to know about... I don't think that, I know, like, we're in a very multicultural city and, like, kind of region of Ontario, and we grow up, like, in brown communities and black communities. We're not, like, the brown people who grew up, like, as the only brown person in a white town or whatever, So we have more experience, like, being in closer proximity to black communities. And, like, obviously you have this very long relationship with hip hop, but I really wonder, like, when you started to think about the way in which you're situated as a brown person within like the hip hop community, and like how that came to you, because I actually think like those moments of like of when you realize that, like those are really important and powerful moments. And I don't think I think it's really important to kind of combat the idea that you're born like knowing these ideas and like you're bulletproof, you know, you've never fucked up, or that like you're born woke or like whatever. It's like, no, like everyone has to learn these things, right? Everyone comes to these understandings. And so I don't know if you have like a story or whatever, but
so I'll just add, before Mastermind answers that, I need you to answer that based on your experiences right after.
Yeah, I mean, I could just tell you that my best friend in high school.
Because that was one of my questions to the both of you, is both of you being so prominent in covering Black culture in your careers. Like, how has that relationship been, and how in your journey of understanding? But Mastermind, let's hear your perspective based on what Anupa asked.
I mean, I kind of learned early on that I was a guest in the house because it would be brought to my attention, and I think when people realized that my intentions were pure and genuine, and that I didn't come from a quote unquote culture vulture kind of mentality, that they realized that I was on the same team, so to speak, if you will, for lack of a better description. But again, when I was, young, getting into this, I could see that there would be some issues with certain people who, and actually in recent years, I've been told that certain people that I consider friends or acquaintances have made comments about, not being, he's not Black and blah, blah, blah. And how my rise to wherever I have, risen to within the hip hop space, the one thing that no one can question is the sincerity of what my support has been, right? I've never tried to invade a space and change that culture. I've just supported that culture and pushed that culture and did everything in my power to elevate that culture and support the people within that culture, and tried my best to be accepted by them based on those things. And I grew up, when I was born, my parents lived down, I think on Jameson or something like that, down by the CNE. And then we moved out to Scarborough. We were at like Eglinton and Midland till about 1980. And so I wasn't in the areas that were, as Anupa was saying, was like, one type of demographic or whatever. Like, I mean, Scarborough at that time was pretty diverse, if you will, to a certain degree. I mean, we moved from there when I was 8 years old. So, I don't remember everything, but I do remember on my street and the friends that we had or whoever we went to school with, there was a bit of diversity, whether it be brown, Black, Asian, et cetera, et cetera. Obviously, there was a lot of white kids and whatnot and white families. But
back in the day when white people lived in Scarborough.
The irony is when we moved from Scarborough and we moved to North York, we moved to Finch and Leslie. We lived in a neighborhood that was predominantly Jewish, and there was us as a brown family, and then on a street adjacent to my street. They were actually on my street. There was another brown family. And boy, oh boy, that brown family wanted to be Jewish so bad.
Oh, really?
They did everything in their power to try to fit in with the Jewish people and the kids and the way the dress and how they acted and whatnot. But the irony is, so where we were in a suburb, but at Finch and Leslie, there was Sparrowways, which was the Ontario housing. And, those kids, we all went to school together. But it was almost like they were separated from us because they lived in that particular housing development. But when we were at school, we were all together, and You know, I kind of hung out with whoever I was, and I got into hip hop in probably, you know, grade 5 or 6 or whatever. And once you get into that, you kind of, I never gravitated. The irony is, I never gravitated towards anybody because of how they look. I gravitated towards friendships, and some of those friendships are lifelong. Like some of my closest friends are friends that I met in, you know, middle school or the beginning of high school, and we all became friends because of hip hop. They just happened to be black and for the most part Jamaican, right? We were just all into hip hop, and we became very, very close. And those are the kids that I grew up with, and essentially consider my family and whatnot. And they all knew that, you know, me, you know, who I wasn't where my heart was in terms of where I was coming from within their culture and wanting to learn it and support it and whatnot. So I've always felt as a guest. I've always tried to maintain. I've never tried to be somebody's boss. Like, I've elevated to certain level in this culture that I now run it. Like, I've never been that way. It's always been, at least in my ideas, in my eyes, I've tried to support as many people as I could that genuinely are from the culture.
And I find it so hard for people to even admit that they're a guest sometimes, right? Like, it's one of those things where I hate to bring it up, but when Lily Singh dropped her reggae track, like, it was the most tone-deaf thing that I've ever seen in my life. And that's not a knock at her, but it just, again, because you grew up in Scarborough doesn't give you the right.
Well, you know what I equate that to? I equate that to the kids who, because they're around certain people or they grow up in certain areas, think that they can say the N-word. And just because they get a cosign from their friends, those are your friends, right? I never said that around my friends.
Me neither.
Like,
my best friend's half Kenyan, half Nigerian. I've never said it to him.
Right. And even if my friends, like, my kids are half black and I get uncomfortable when they say it.
Yeah.
Right? And I tell them, and I'm like, look, man, like, not everybody looks at you like you look more Indian than you do black. And regardless, no one's going to ask you to pull out pictures of mom and dad and say, hey, I'm allowed to say this word, because in the heat of the moment, they might just look at you and be like, why are you saying it? Like, you have to understand the optics of it, right? And they're grown and they're allowed to make their own decisions and stuff. But, you know, as a parent, I put it out there and said, this is the way I look at it. Do you know what I mean? So, you know.
Actually, just on that, Anupa, did you write an article about Nav and the N-word?
Yeah.
And not me, the artist Nav.
No, not you. Not like the 5 other Navs.
Nav.
Not super fan Nav.
Yeah.
Don't get it twisted.
The other Nav. Yeah, I mean, I'll back it up by just saying that, like, you know, for me, like, I grew up in Brampton. I'm Gujarati. My family is from Gujarat, although, you know, it's important for me, I think, lately, I just think about the ways in which I need to contextualize myself, right? Like, my grandparents are born in India. My parents are born in East Africa because they're part of, like, that cohort of people from India who are brought over by the British to, like, be civil servants, or, well, my dad's father was a laborer, but to come and work there. And then that's how they were granted British citizenship, right? Via the colony. And so I was born in England, and now I grew up here. And I think that's a reason I experience a lot of disconnect, you know, like, I don't really relate to the idea, or like this South Asian we, this Indian we. I feel really, like, uncomfortable with that because I feel so disconnected to where my family is from, even though I think my parents have a very strong culture. I also feel it because I'm darker skinned than what a lot of people's ideas of North Indian people are. And I think as a woman, you know, I think I feel that doubly. Like, when I was in high school, and maybe because of who I hung out with, like, I got a lot of, oh, you're Guyanese, you're Trini. And I was never, you know, like, also, like, you know, I remember, like, some kids, like, wanting to do that, like, wanting to align themselves with West Indian brown people rather than like maybe if they were South Indian or Tamil, like talking about where their families were from. I remember there was a lot of shame around that, but I wasn't one of those people. I just didn't get it. I was like, wait, so you think I'm not like you? And this was coming from other brown kids. You think I'm not like you because I don't like conform to these ideas of what you think like brownness is. So I'm like, okay, well, fuck that, you know? I still had brown friends. I hung out with everyone, but my best friend to this day is Jamaican, and she checked me when we were in high school, you know? Like, and it wasn't like I didn't say the N-word. It was like I don't know. I'm sure it was something I heard on the news. I can't even remember what it was now, but I do remember being checked, you know? Yeah. And like that's okay. I could talk about that. Like it was important. She probably doesn't even remember it, you know? And it wasn't like this like tense thing, but I think it really was important for me, you know? And there are other ways in which I have like learned over the years because I have like that. I have the memory in my body of like feeling so embarrassed, like, oh my God, I'm like, I have just been so ignorant in the face of like someone who I love and care about so deeply. Like, of course I never want to make this mistake again, you know? Anyway, so now we'll talk about Nav, which is just to say that. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that impulse has been like present in me for a very long time. And that is not to say that I knew everything when I was 16 years old and I haven't learned. I have learned over the course of the years. Like I am so grateful to like have Black friends who have been willing to not teach me, just talk about their life experiences. And I listen, you know what I mean? I listen when they talk. I listen when they tell me things. I'm interested in not just the music and not just like the movies and the art made by Black people, but like the ideas behind it, right? And then you very quickly come to understand that like not every Black person thinks the same, right? And like, what does that do? That expands your ideas of like what you're even talking about when you're trying to regurgitate some distilled version of like a dance hall tune like Lily Singh did, right? Like the thing I think that offends people is that she is projecting like this very one-dimensional view of Blackness, right? And I think that is really unfair. I think that like really, I think she's telling on herself with that. Like it's like, oh, like you actually don't know what you're doing. You know, you don't know what you're talking about. And the thing with Nav was I was like, okay, so I don't really listen to Nav's music, but you know, I'd heard people like talking about him for a while. Obviously I'd heard some of his stuff. I wasn't a fan like that. But I was interested, right? Because I'm like, okay, like this is like a kid like me, a kid like us who like kind of grew up in and around this GTA, right, area where you have some context for, and it's not true actually, because I've met brown kids who like I was their first brown friend. So it's not. This isn't. Yeah, I know.
I feel like our stories are so similar, but I'll let you finish.
No, I know. I'm being long-winded, but like as the same way that I say that like not the stories of one community are not all the same, the stories of people like us are also not the same. But yeah, I was just curious. I'm like, okay, like what is the deal with this kid? There was something about him that seemed really familiar, right? It reminded me of guys I went to school with, and yeah, and then I just started seeing people like talk about it online, like about him saying the N-word, and I was like, it just got to a point where I was like, I feel like my credibility is on the line if I don't say anything, right? Because like a lot of my work, like while it was about hip hop and music more broadly, you know, I've never just tried to be like a hip hop person, because while it was music that is very close to me, like from growing up, I've also always been into a lot of different kind of stuff too. But I've written about a lot of Black artists in the city, and I've supported a lot of Black artists in the city. And by way of that, I think I've talked a lot about like anti-racism and social justice oriented ideas through my work, you know? And I was like, okay, so like, if I don't say anything about this, that it's like my full credibility is on the line, right? And it was important, right? Like these things were also starting to swirl around me in other ways. It's almost like we're at this point now where all these brown people online are talking about what it means to be a non-Black person of color, but it's like these things had been surfacing in like my periphery from around that time, and I knew like important conversations were like overdue, and I was like, okay, well, like now we need to talk about it. And it was funny because either right before that or right after that, there was a brown kid who DM'd me his music, and like it was good. I'm not gonna say his name. It was good, but like he said the N-word in it, and I was like, dude, I was like, all I said was, I was like, yo, like cool, like I think you should keep putting in work, but like you really need to stop saying the N-word in your music, because like someone's gonna slap you in the face, right? Or like punch you in the face. Like it's exactly like what you said, Paul. Like that's what makes this complicated, right? Because you get kids like this who are like, well, my friends don't care, and it's like, okay, but when you leave your ends, like
Yeah.
who knows what's gonna happen?
You are listening to New Theory Radio.
When I worked where I worked, and we would take music submissions, you know, for our homegrown program, I would run into instances like that. You know, I mean, there would be the odd brown kid or whatever that would send in a record, and I would hear it, and I would DM them. I'm like, yo, are you brown? And they'd be like, yeah. And I'm like, okay, stop. Don't make records with that. And they'd question it, and I'd be like, it's not your word. Be like, you're not that. And I would be blunt with them, because you know, I had to talk to them as an elder, and that's what I did. I looked at it like listen, I've been doing this before you were even born. And so if I'm going to give you any advice, and you want me to help your career by getting you on the radio, then you have to listen to what someone who has the knowledge is trying to tell you. And for the most part, they were accepting of what I was saying. Now, whether or not they actually, you know, put my advice into action, you know, remains to be seen with them and their music and whatnot. But again, you know, I've always questioned that whole, like, even Fat Joe was one. Like, Fat Joe's got a cosign since the beginning of his career. Yeah. And they just, everybody says it's okay for him to say it and stuff. And I mean, okay. I can't say anything.
I feel like both of those instances, both the article, Anupa, you wrote about Nav and Mastermind, your interactions during the Made in Toronto takeover program, I think are great references to a lot of the conversations that we're kind of having now within our communities, right? And personally speaking, just to kind of, you know, as I was hearing both of your stories as to how you guys came up and just the people you surrounded yourself with, I could definitely relate, because my relationship with my best friend stemmed from our love of hip hop. And Anupa, to your upbringing, I was the guy that always sort of gravitated more towards Black culture and always was questioned by my South Asian friends, like, why do you sag your pants, or why do you wear big clothes, or why do you do this, why do you do that? And I think for me, my parents just raised me to be very open-minded growing up, that they just kind of allowed me to become whoever I wanted to become.
And I got that pushback from other brown people, which I thought was so fucking interesting,
all
right?
The time.
Like, it came from other brown kids. Like, why are you... That's where the anti-Blackness came from, right? Like, it came from the other brown kids that I went to school with, more so than anything else.
I remember being in high school, and there would always be like the Black versus brown fights. Like, you'd have your brown gangs versus your Black gangs. And again, at the time growing up, I was oblivious to the fact that that's actually borderline, like, that's racist. Like, that the fact that you had division in certain high schools where you'd have your Black gang versus your brown gang, and they would always sort of say bad things to each other. I just thought it was normal, but looking back on it, you're like, that probably was the best thing.
That was happening in Brampton?
Yeah, man, it was happening when I was growing up.
Man, they were fighting the wrong guys in Brampton.
Well, the high school I went to, the white folks were the minority.
What high school did you go to?
I can't say because I love them too much.
Oh, okay. When I was going to high school, it was like the Punjabi guys versus the Tamil guys, and the Tamil guys would drive over from Scarborough and like have fights at Brampton High School.
Well, then I was used to seeing a cop car at my school every day. And and now as we're sort of seeing a lot of these videos get leaked from the U.S. and even seeing some of the interactions with police here locally, I think back to just my high school years and some of the things that I would see involving the cops and some of our students and how it was very unfair and how it just didn't like, it doesn't sit well with me right now. But yeah, I won't ask you what high school you went to because I don't want to put it on blast. Unless you want to share, it's up to you.
Doesn't matter.
But I do want to go back, like, Mastermind, you talked about how when you were growing up, there was that one South Asian family that really modeled the Jewish family on the block.
Oh, yeah.
And it kind of makes me think about the model minority myth that's been sort of brought up quite a bit. And I know Hassan Minaj, and Mastermind, you and I talked about it, and Anupa, I know you still have to see the little monologue that he did. But there's always been this notion when it comes to POCs that they need to, because they're new to a country, they need to sort of live up to a certain standard to be accepted. And most of the time when you have a minority that comes into a country that's, probably filled with predominantly white people, they're probably looking at white folks as being the goal or the attainment that they need to reach. And I'm just wondering, like, how like, what's your guys' thoughts on that and the fact that now we're starting to see that get peeled back a bit, considering the conversations that are taking place right now?
You're making me remember, like, that I forgot about. Like, so, growing up, we had a family friend. There was a white family that we somehow were very close with, and they were super white. Like, I'm talking, cigarette rolled up in the sleeve, baseball hat.
Wow, I forgot about that. I forgot people used to do that.
Like the accent and stuff. And I always I never questioned why we were friends because I was so young at the time. But it makes me wonder why they gravitated towards our family. But the point I was getting made was that I remember my dad at work. I went and I met some of his work friends one time, and they called him Jimmy.
Oh, here we go.
In my head, I was like, what the fuck is Jimmy? And I would ask my dad, I'm like, yo, why are they calling you Jimmy? And he was like, because they can't pronounce Gokul. Because that's my dad's name. Yeah. And as a kid, you kind of just shrug and be like, whatever. But it wasn't until I became a teenager that I was like, that is that's so up that they, instead of just calling you, by your name, and the fact that he kind of let it go. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so his name was Gokul, but this white family would call him Gorkul. And at first I thought it maybe was their accent or whatever, because I think they might have been from the East Coast or whatever. Mm-hmm. I never knew them beyond what their names were and, the sons that I was friends with and blah, blah, blah. But they used to call him Gorkul. And again, I'd be like, how can these people, like, how are they struggling to pronounce, like, such a simple name? Like, we're not talking about anything so challenging, you know what I mean? And it's just funny, I forgot about stuff like that, but that, completely exists probably even now. You know what I mean? Think about how many brown guys, westernized their names.
Yeah, I'm guilty of that, man. My full name is Naveet, but I only made mine Nav because people will pronounce it Navneet.
Yeah, but you know what though? Like, I'm not talking about that because you're still using your name.
I didn't change it to Nathan.
but that's my whole point, right? Like, it's going from somebody who, his name is Gurinder. Well, even Gurinder and Gary, I've seen that, but even that's kind of close. But there's been some wild, like Jimmy and Gokul don't make no sense.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, there's no correlation whatsoever. And so if you're talking about assimilation, there it is right there. People just trying to assimilate, right?
But I guess where I'm trying to go with this is because that assimilation took place, do you think that's what maybe was rooted in regards to the fact that there have been, the fact that racism amongst Black people within South Asian culture exists?
Oh.
Well, I don't know why it exists other than the fact that maybe it's been drilled into our heads. Do you know what I mean? Like, because the people that have genuinely gone out of their way to embrace people of a different of the Black community, regardless of what that background is, whether it's Jamaican or African or whatever, they will tend to realize that most of these myths that have been drilled into our heads by the system, so to speak, are false, right? And so, you know, I didn't have my parents were never ones that told me who I could and couldn't hang out with.
Yeah, same.
But I will say, like, you know, my parents are obviously a little older than yours, but they did, you know, they would question, like, for example, my mom, you know, and we didn't have the greatest of relationships because of her steadfast systemic racism. Like, she just couldn't get it out of her. She was more concerned about how the community would look at her and look down on her if, you know, I was with somebody that wasn't approved, as opposed to caring more about her son's happiness or her daughter's happiness or whatever.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
You know, she would say, you know, why don't you go DJ the Bungra parties? Like, you should DJ, you know, when there was like those Indian TV shows that would come on like Sunday morning on Channel 47 or whatever they were.
Like Ion Asia and all that.
All that stuff. She goes, why don't you go do that? How come you don't go do that? And she just couldn't get it into her head that I don't like that. That's not me. Like, I want to play hip hop. This is what I'm into. You know what I mean? And it just, you know, trust me when I say she wasn't like walking down the street, you know, screaming things at people, but there definitely was a sense of shame. You know what I mean? If like, I had to hide my girlfriend for like the longest time because I didn't want to deal with, you know, fighting with her. Yeah. Girlfriends, you know what I mean? Like, up until whenever, but it's like, it's a systemic thing. And it's weird to me that it still exists. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, obviously I've broken that cycle because I don't subscribe to it. I'm assuming both of you have broken that cycle because y'all don't subscribe to it. And I know a lot of people like me who have broken that cycle that don't subscribe to it. However, there are still people who subscribe to it that are probably within either younger than me, which is super weird, but also from my same age demo. Mm-hmm. And so, again, none of it makes sense other than they just continue this perpetual cycle of built-in, you know, racism.
Anupa, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I've been very interested in just what it means to be brown and what it means to be brown in like a culture and a time where most of the ways in which we talk about identity politics is very binary. It's black or white, you know? And so where do people like us fit in it's very interesting, right? Like, one of the things that I hate is, like, I don't love the Mindy Kaling. I tend to I don't really love like anything that brown American people put out, right? Because I'm like, I don't get it. Like, clearly you grew up in like very white communities. And so like, I don't understand anything you're saying. I don't understand like why you value the things that you value, because it doesn't reflect my experience. And I never really had the language to really understand that until I realized like what the patterns of Indian immigration to the US look like, right? So it's really important, I think, for us to think about the ways in which South Asian people were, quote unquote, allowed to come to places like the UK and Canada and the US, because the doors were opened in completely different ways, right? Yeah. In the US, and of course there was like Punjabi laborers on the West Coast, and that's kind of its own thing. But like in the US, it's like, I think it was in the 70s, they started letting people come in to do their master's and their PhD. That's bringing in like a completely different kind of person than, you know, bringing in people who are like laborers and things like that, or who are more blue collar workers. Yeah. And that's why you get these people who have kind of grown up in these very like white communities, because they're children of these people who are white collar professionals, right? And that means that there's different values. I mean, like, let's talk about what Hindus for Trump actually means. Like, what the is that, you know?
Mm-hmm.
It's a thing. It's a very serious thing. And it's also why there's like this huge like political alliance between Trump and Modi. That's super dangerous.
Can I just say one thing? I don't understand the logic of those people because
yeah.
and I'm going to be quite frank, because if he and his supporters had it their way, you would be clumped and being treated exactly the way he's treating black people. And you know, when I see Latinos like riding for this guy, and I'm like, yo, your people, he told your people that y'all rapists and put you in cages and blah blah.
He wanted to build a wall, man.
Right. Well, I think in the U.S. it really comes down to like where brown people are situated, like within the political system and within like other systems of organization, right? Look at Silicon Valley, like how many brown people are in there, right? How much money is associated with Silicon Valley? Look at like the political system, and like you look at people like Nikki Haley and Bobby Jindal and all of these like brown Republicans. It's like they are class. They have class values, and they are the model minority. You know, like when we talk about the model minority myth, it's like these people were brought in and like weaponized to say, hey, if these people can get their act together and pull their bootstraps up, then why can't you black people or you like Mexicans or whatever? Why can't you do that, right? So I think it's really important to acknowledge that. But I want to go back to your original question, which is like, where does this come from? And it comes from the caste system, and it's like super important that brown people start to talk about that, especially Indian people, because like that shit is real. Like this system of organization that lumps people into like arbitrary social communities based on like fake biology, right? Like so and so touched this, so like I can't touch it, and like I'm gonna have to wash my hands, or you can't come in the house because you're unclean, or you're unclean, so you have to do like the dirty work. Like that type of social strata. Like think about like in the 60s, like or 50s, black and white water fountains in the States, right? Like that system has been in place in India, and there's a lot of evidence to suggest that the caste system predates like colonialism. But people, I think, like religious people try and say that it's part of Hinduism. It's like how it's how this religious society was organized. And I think there's a lot of evidence to suggest that's not true. And people use that to justify its existence, right? And I think it's important to talk about it because that shit has not been reconciled in migration.
No, it hasn't.
Right? It has
still comes up. I still hear it in conversations.
Exactly, right? Like I'm Gujarati. My last name is Mistry. I remember growing up hearing like my mom on the phone, people being like, so-and-so wants to marry a Patel, but they think they're too good for us. And I had no context for what that means, right? But now I understand, like, that's what that is, right? These like very intricate like caste hierarchies. And it's causing a lot of problems in India, right? Like if you look at like who the population is that's overrepresented in prisons there, why the prison industrial complex in India exists, it correlates with America, right? It's like untouchable Dalit people and Muslims who are in jails disproportionately in India, right? And so I think it's important for us to think about that. I think it's important for us to see like how upper caste people are represented in like brown representation in the US, in the UK, and America, because we're not seeing like the full spectrum of the brown experience. And that's why you get things like, oh, like I can't relate to this brown person because their experience doesn't, and because we're not a monolith, you know what I mean? But that is the origins. Like we are oriented towards anti-blackness because we have our own indigenous form of like social discrimination, right? And then you throw colonialism on top of it, and it's like India was the jewel in the British Empire, right? And so we were weaponized against Black people, you know?
Even the notion of just being dark-skinned in our culture.
Yes.
People go up in arms about it. Like I've even admittedly I've been teased about my dark skin in my family. Like, and it's probably as a joke, but that stuff is real. Like that's why Bollywood is getting slandered like no tomorrow during this entire racism injustice conversation, because all of these Bollywood actresses that are standing up for this are also the ones responsible for endorsing skin lightening creams. Like it's It's so
That's
it's
that's anti-blackness, like indigenous within our own community, right? Like that's not even including Black people. That's how anti-blackness manifests, like within us, as a ethnic group. You know what I mean? So it's like, and then you bring actual Black people into the mix, and it's like, what do you think is going to happen? You know? So I think, like, you know, I think if there's one thing that I would want to say in this conversation, because I could talk forever about this stuff.
No worries.
Something that feels really useful for me, like, because I really think, you know, we're getting a lot of panicked conversations online, and I think a lot of the panic is coming from white people, but I think a lot of the panic is coming from brown people and like East Asian people, people who are not Black, like trying to understand like what they can do. And I think the conversations about like how to be an ally are like super important, of course. But I think a lot of fear comes from like trying to understand like everything that Black people are saying. And I think it's very important, of course, to listen and understand that. But I think like a place of empowerment, because you can't intellectually grasp another person's experience, right? You don't live in that body, right? And so for me, something that I find really helpful is to understand myself and where I come from and my community and the patterns that are present in my community, because it all correlates to what's happening in America or what's happening in the Western world, you know? And when you start to unlearn and understand how, or when you start to learn and understand how there are systems that impact your own community, I think like you're able to come at this stuff from a more empowered place rather than feeling helpless. Like, I don't know what to say to my Black friend. You know what I mean? It's like, you can't get in other people's heads. So what can you do? Where can you like get information that might be hard? Of course it's going to be hard, right? Of course it's going to be hard to talk to your parents and be like, why do you look down on like our other brown neighbors or whatever it might be? But like, it comes from a place of, to me, it feels like it comes from a place, it's empowering, right? Because it's not about like extrapolating your understanding onto someone else. It's about like learning to stand taller in who you are and learning how to undo things that are within you that relate to your own identity, right?
I just hope with everything going on and the fact, again, I've had a lot of intriguing conversations with elders in my immediate family that other South Asians or other POCs use the news right now to their advantage to have these conversations versus just shy away from them. Because again, I had a pretty woke conversation with like my father-in-law last week where I was genuinely surprised with his POV and just how progressive it was. And it's not a knock at him, but it's just surprising being the child of South Asian immigrants to see a bit of a change in thought, you know?
I'll take that. I'll take it as a positive. I mean, that's a win, right? Because there's a lot of people that I won't even engage in conversation because it's like talking to a brick wall. Literally. And again, I have very little patience for bullshit. And so, you know, if you cannot see the injustices that are right there in front of your eyes and you want to argue back or be dismissive or try to downplay it or in any other way say something that it's not what it is, we're going to have it's going to be a very bad conversation. Mm-hmm. I don't debate people. I'm not good at that. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not a very passive, I want to have a conversation and change your mind kind of guy. It's like, you're seeing the knee on the neck and it doesn't happen to anybody else, any other kind of people. Mm-hmm. And that's it right there. There is no discussion. You know what I mean? When I see videos that contrast how black people are treated versus how white people are treated by the police, it's infuriating. Mm-hmm. And I know I use that term a lot about what's going on right now, but it's exactly what it is. I can't even, and then the people who even try to remotely put it into any kind of justifiable context, again, I have little tolerance for.
Have any of your, and this is the question for the both of you, have you guys encountered any conversations over the last 2 weeks from non-POCs wanting to understand more about what's going on, and because of your previous work or what you do and the fact that you guys are, you guys have covered and profiled Black culture before, have they almost come to you as being an information source to better understand what's going on? And do you guys feel comfortable being in that situation if that's the case?
Nope.
Nope to both answers, to both questions, actually. I don't feel comfortable because it's not my place to speak about it, other than to support them. Yeah. It's not I'm not their talking head. You know what I mean? I'm not the guy that should be on the stage down at Nathan Phillips Square with the mic in his hand speaking about their plight right now. I'm not that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Wife, on the other hand, if she wants to, she can, right? Because she has every right to. Mm-hmm. And no, none of my non-POC friends or acquaintances have asked my opinion or wanted any kind of insider conversation, because I think the ones that what I would consider friends are already on the same page.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I don't, again, you're talking about how your last week at work was, kind of uncomfortable, I think was a term you used or something.
Like it was interesting. And it's interesting that you guys both said nope, because the first part of my question in regards to people coming to me, like non-POCs, I've had that. And do I feel comfortable? I'm in the same boat as you guys. Like, I don't feel comfortable having that conversation.
Oh, well, I'll say this. It's not that I don't feel comfortable having that conversation. I mean, it's twofold for me, right? Like, one, I definitely know that the white people who, like, some people have, like, tagged me in things, like wanting me to chime in or whatever. And I'm like, no, like, I know you see me as an outspoken person, and I'm not going to, like, perform, like, my outrage for you or, like, perform my allyship for you. Like, my loyalty and, like, my support is, like, going to Black people. It's to amplifying and sharing. I'm like, you can see what people are saying online. Like, I don't need to explain it for you. However, I do think that, there are certain situations in which, like, it is on me to, in some ways, be an intermediary. You know what I mean? Like, because it can't all fall to, like, say, the Black person in the office to explain everything, right? Yeah. Or to hold everyone's hand. And I don't think it's about me trying to speak for that experience. It's about me, like, intervening and being like, hey, maybe you should think about this. If you have a colleague who's having, like, a bad day, or who's like, I had a friend of mine be like, in a meeting, and all of her white colleagues were like, yes, so-and-so, who's a Black person, is out sick. They kept saying, she's out sick. And, like, my friend had to be like, she's not out sick. Like, there's a lot going on in the world, and, like, maybe consider that before you, like, tag her into doing tasks, right? And exactly. So that's what I mean about intervening. It's about saying, like, look, like, you need to think about what you're saying. You need to, like, expand, like, your capacity for empathy right now, because it's not all, like, business as usual for everyone. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the role that people like us have to play, right? It's not about, like, teaching or explaining someone else's experience. It's about, like, just, like, telling, like, checking people, right? Being like, hey, before you, like, go and, like, say this is urgent and it has to be done tonight, think about, like, what their experience might be. Or, like, if you have a colleague who's like, yeah, I'm just not, like, paying a lot of attention to the news right now, but they have, like, Black people on their team. It's like, you don't get to do that. You don't get to be the senior manager of a team with Black people on it and act like you don't know what's going on in the world, right? Mm-hmm. Like, so I think these are the ways in which we should be, like, this is where people talk about, like, the responsibility of non-Black people of color. It's like, it's this kind of stuff, right?
Yeah, I agree.
So that's, like, what, I hate the word ally personally, but that's what allyship is. You know what I mean?
I wish you had told me that before I put the advertisement out, but it's okay.
It's all good. I know it means something to people. It's just, like, my personal preference. That's all.
Well, actually, let's get into that. And this is probably a good way to kind of bring everything together. allyship has been the word that's been popping up over the last 2 weeks when it comes to this. That I've seen that being shared when it comes to performative allyship versus non-optical allyship. But I just wanted to get both your guys' thoughts on the word allyship and what does that really mean? And moving forward as a community, what can we do to really assist the situation right now when it comes to the Black Lives Matter movement? And maybe Anupa, will begin with you.
Well, I guess, I mean, the first thing I would say is it's on Black people to say what they think is like allyship and what's not allyship, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think, I think, yes, I definitely agree with you. I've seen like a lot of performative stuff. One thing for me, I went to the march here last week for Regis Korchinski-Paquette, and I was disoriented. I was like, there's a lot of white people here, and over the, I've talked to friends in Detroit and in LA and like in other parts of the States who are like, yeah, there's so many white people out. And it's like, it's about time. You know what I mean? So like, yes, there's like these things of, do you feel comfortable in these spaces? Do you know what's going to happen? Is it performative? Like what, like, is this like hipster, I don't know, wokeness or whatever? But
is it for the gram?
Yeah, is it for the gram? But it's also like ultimately like Black people should not be carrying this burden all alone, right? And like it's actually about time that you get more people starting to come out. And you're starting to see, like if you look online at actual protest footage, not news footage of the protests, you see like white people putting themselves and their bodies in the way of the police and Black people. And it's like, yes, like that's what you actually have to be doing because they're not going to hurt you. Yeah. Right. And so,
they're starting to hurt them now.
Oh yeah.
Oh, they are. I mean, when you it's without trying to be controversial or whatever, like white supremacists, like they hate everybody that's not white, and then they hate white people supporting people that are not white.
Right. Yeah.
Right below it. So it's like when they got their there's the video that's been floating around of the elderly white man that got thrown to the ground in Buffalo a couple of years ago.
Horrible.
And
right, or the woman in Charlottesville who got killed.
Run over.
Yeah.
But I mean, even now, there's like they don't care. They're like, oh, you're with them? Okay, you're one of them. And so, as much as you're right, there have been.
I guess I'm talking more about in police interactions.
No, yeah, but this is so like maybe prior, like maybe 4 or 5 days ago, what you were saying would have been factual. But since then, they're like, oh, you really are with them. And so they're getting hit in the face with the pepper spray. They're getting the batons and the bats, and they're getting all of that now.
Yeah. Well, once again, I mean, like, this is not, but it's not only like the burden of Black people to bear, it's like, if that's what we're talking about, right? Like, then that's what it has to be. Unfortunately, like, if that's what it takes to like defund the police or reform like the institution of policing and justice, then
Mm-hmm. But then it also, it also gives them a first-hand view of the treatment. It's like, oh, now you know. Oh, you see what it's like. That's what it is.
Yeah.
That's allyship. There you go, Nav.
Yeah.
Mastermind. What are your thoughts?
I can't say it any better than Anupa said it. It's like, again, I saw a tweet, earlier this week, and it said, to all the white people who were invited to the cookout, this is the cookout.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that kind of sums it up. It's like, this is what we're going through. If you're about that and you're about that talk, then this is what it is. So let's go. You know what I mean? And again, it's not for anybody to co-opt these things. Like, again, as you mentioned with the protest, there was one yesterday, and then there was one today, and there's a lot of paying attention to who's organizing.
Yeah.
Because, again, you cannot co-opt somebody's plight. And sure, you can say, hey, I want to support you, but you can't take it over and all of a sudden start saying how it's going to operate, how it's going to run.
Exactly.
Well, the reason that stuff is also really fucked up is because, or effed up, sorry, is because...
Okay, I got a lot of editing to do. It's fine, guys.
Because people who are organizing, especially around Black Lives Matter and the movement for Black Lives, they're extremely organized, you know?
Yeah.
They have people there, like, watching, what is it called? Like the observers who are there basically in case like pops off. They have legal observers. They have enough volunteers. They have protocol in place for safety. And when safety protocol isn't followed and things get crazy, who gets blamed, right? And so like that's why that stuff is actually super important, because we don't like the casual, like the person who's casually taking in the news has no idea. Like if you start to read up on movements, we have no concept of how incredibly organized that work is. Yeah. It is super, super organized, you know, but all you see on TV is a mass of people and you think it's chaos, and it's like, it's actually not like that, you know? And so when that stuff happens, it undermines the really important work that's being done, you know? And I think like these are the things that we have to do as allies, right? Like I think like after the black squares, I did not like that personally. But the reason I didn't like it was because I was like, what are you actually saying? You know what I mean? It's like one thing to post a black square. It's one thing to post not hashtag Black Lives Matter, but like Black Lives Matter on it. But like, what else are you saying? Right. And I'm like, I actually think like it's really important for us to say, like, you know, a friend of mine posted, who's a lawyer, a black woman, she was like, the media wants to project the idea that there's a lot of chaos going on and that the protesters don't have any clear demands. And it's like, no, they have a clear demand: defund police, right? Mm-hmm. And so when people are talking about like, well, what do they want? Like, why are they da-da-da? It's like your responsibility as an ally is to clarify like how protests are organized, what that means for like what you're seeing on TV versus like what's actually happening. It's to clarify like what justice means. It's to clarify like what the demands mean. Like if you are able to offer information, I don't see it as like having to like handhold anyone. I think it's about like making legible people who are like systemically made illegible. You know what I mean? It's like you have to, that's like, to me, that's what like walking the walk or whatever is, right? Like understanding that like the news doesn't want this to be portrayed as like grassroots, like a major grassroots momentum that is incredibly well organized, that is the will of the people. They want to project it as like total chaos. They want to project it as like random violence that is like, that corroborates the ways in which we have been trained to see like Black people and the way that anti-Blackness is present in our culture. And so like what we need to say is actually like, this is what they want. This is why it matters. This is why it's reasonable. And like, here's like the 8-point slideshow on like why you should defund the police. You know what I mean? Yeah. I think, and like, that's actually been the really beautiful thing about social media is like all of these little graphics and stuff that have come out have been so useful, right? Like understanding how much of your like property taxes go towards funding the police. Like that stuff is, I had no idea. I mean, I don't own property, but like really useful to know that, right? And like, why? And like, why that versus the library? I use the library every day. Like I want more of my money going to the library, right? Or you both have kids. How much more money do you want going to schools, you know?
Seeing the comparisons of the amount of money that's spent on police armor versus PPE for nurses right now and doctors.
Crazy.
Mind-blowing. Like, absolutely mind-blowing. Just to close this conversation out, and again, I thank the both of you because this has been amazing. What is the biggest piece of change that you want to see when it comes to the current relationship between POC communities and the Black communities?
I'll let you go first.
Personally, and it's probably not going to be very eloquent by any stretch, but wanting the POCs to understand that they are exactly the same as Black people, and in a society that is trying to still uphold a very systemically racist structure, that you don't fit in that. You're not in that. They will treat you the exact same way they will treat a Black person when there's no more Black people around, so to speak. You know what I mean? So you're next. And then why are you propping that up, that system up, to hurt people that you think and unjustifiably think are beneath you? And so they have to understand that it's all one versus that system. And if they don't, then they're stupid.
I feel like I understand what you're saying, but I'm going to say the opposite, which is I want POC to realize they're not the same as Black people. And the reason I say that is because I don't want any more like Lily Singh bullshit, right? Like, I think that I totally get what you're saying, Paul.
Right.
Like that, like we have to think about what white supremacy means versus like being in a not white body. But I think that like it's really important for brown people to not cast their oppression with Black people, because that's when you get like these fuck ups, right? Mm-hmm. That's when you get people saying, well, like I can do it because like they think that like being called a Paki once is the same thing as police brutality, right? Which it's not the same thing, right? Mm-hmm. You don't have your physical body in danger in the exact same way by the state. Like, sure, maybe randomized violence. Yeah, but like by the state apparatus, like it's not the same thing. And so, and once you're able to understand that, then I think you can then proceed to what you're saying, Paul, right? Which is just like, you have to be able to understand the ways in which the world is organized and set up to uphold one group of people. I shouldn't even say a group of people, because like, I think whiteness is even more disembodied than that. You know what I mean? I think it's more about like one set of values might be a better way of putting it, right? Mm. It's about upholding one set of values, and everything else that does not fit into that is gonna get is a problem. Mm-hmm. And it will become a problem when, say, the other problems are no longer there, as you said, Paul. You know what I mean? And so I think people just need to listen more. They need to listen to Black people more.
100%.
People do that.
Yeah.
And I think once you start doing that, because the other thing too is like, we wouldn't be here, right, if it wasn't for like the ways in which Black people in America and in Canada and in the UK fought for their rights. We have to listen to them. And all of the anti-oppression theory that like makes the most sense, that articulates what I'm trying to say much more clearly, it comes from Black people because they understand the stratification of the world the most, right? Because of where they're situated, and Indigenous people, of course, too, you know?
Yeah.
And I think people should follow South Asians for Black Lives on Instagram, because there's a lot of good resources on there. Yeah, if they're interested in this, because like I'm just a person who reads and likes to talk about this stuff out loud, but I'm by no means an expert.
Well, hey, your perspective is appreciated.
I'm just glad I prefaced my comment by saying it wouldn't be as eloquent.
It was very eloquent.
No, don't lie.
Oh, no, but I got what you mean. I got your meaning.
Yeah, I do agree that the Lily Singh type needs to stop. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Shouldn't even we could in the first place, but here we are.
Yeah, I honestly agree with the both of you. I just hope we're understanding at the end of the day. And again, I think a lot of the conversations I had this week were in that same vein. So I hope people continue to educate and understand, and hopefully they
be uncomfortable. Like, this is not comfortable. It's not going to be nice. Like, you're not going to feel good about it. It's going to probably make you feel really bad. But like, you're not being killed by police. So like, you gotta feel bad.
Definitely get over it. So
yeah, absolutely.
So
want to thank the both of you for joining me on New Thing. Look at the time. Wow, we talked for an hour and a half. I love it.
You said 7, and I was like, that's not gonna happen.
Well, I'm glad that you guys completely booked off your evening. I love it. No, but thanks to both of you. Yeah, we have nothing else to do, right? It's a quarantine. But a big thanks to the both of you. I really appreciate it. Right now, this is usually the point of the show where you guys get to plug whatever you're working on, or maybe people want to connect with you. Anupa, let's begin with you. You're the ghost, so let us know If a listener wants to, interact more with the Anupa Mistry, what's the way outside of the Fader?
Don't. I'm kidding. I shouldn't say that, especially when I say like it's on us to like intervene. So you could Google me. I'm very Googleable. I don't respond to DMs on Instagram. I'm not on Twitter, but I'm available. Yeah. I'm on the internet. You got
a podcast, right?
I have a podcast, which I don't know. I'm considering now bringing it back because I think there's some conversations to be had. It's called Burnout. It's conversations with Canadian artists, and it's really talking about what it means to build sustainable creative careers. And I'm finished working on a CBC podcast, which you will hear Mastermind in one of the episodes, called This Is Not a Drake Podcast, and it's coming out soon.
Mastermind, what about you, man? You're always up to something.
No, actually, I'm on an extended hiatus right now, enjoying.
But you're so active on social, man.
Well, you gotta be. If that's the only place that I have a voice right now, then that's where it's gonna be. Mm. But no, I'm just doing a lot of checking off items on my honey-do list because that's all I got going on right now. Stuff around the house and again, just trying to take advantage of some well-deserved downtime that I haven't had for quite a long time. So, yeah. And again, as far as socials are concerned, I'm very findable. Like I'm not hard to find. So I don't know if I'm Googleable, but I'm sure if you really try hard enough, you'll find me.
I feel like you're underneath Mastermind Toys if you look.
Probably. Yeah. Somewhere in.
But we'll include all your socials on the podcast description. Hey, Mastermind, we're waiting for that book, man. So just write that book.
What's your book gonna be?
I have no idea. Okay. I've had so many people
about all your photos, like all those celebrity photos and stories. Like we need to hear all those, man.
Yeah, but you see how great this is. My memory is not very good anymore, and so the things that I remember are very sporadic. And the irony is I never did any drugs or drank or anything. It's just a bad memory. But I've had a lot of people come to me about doing whether it be a podcast, book, a documentary, or whatever. And we'll see how it all plays out. But, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you both for joining us. We are going to take a quick commercial break, and we'll be right back with more New Theory Radio.
You are listening to New Theory.
Theory Radio here live on News Talk Sauga 960 AM. My name is Nav Nanwa. I am your host, and it is our NTR Spotlight. This is a new segment that we're bringing to the show where we profile and highlight creatives, both locally and globally, whether it's an artist or an organization. And I'm super honored, actually, for the very first NTR Spotlight here on New Theory Radio to welcome an individual who is very well known, not just within the GTA, but all across the world. He is a Toronto-based producer, definitely on the rise. Whether it's touring the world with the likes of Brampton girl Jessie Reyez as her DJ and longtime creative collaborator, or busy in the studio cooking up tracks with the who's who of the up-and-coming global hip-hop and R&B scenes. This incredible creative influence individual has contagious positive vibes and instantaneously wins people over everywhere he goes. And his album, Studio Monk, you need to go check it out. It is fantastic. And I'm super honored to have him here on New Theory Radio. He is Mississauga's own Junior T. Junior, thanks so much, man, for making time for NTR.
Thank you for having me, y'all. Really appreciate it, man.
Yeah, man. And you know what? I've been, like I said, I've been bumping Studio Monk for the longest time, and And it's such an epic record. We had Story on the show a few months back, actually, when the quarantine hit. And I know like that's around the time when like Studio Monk had just come out. So she was raving about her contributions. And I have to ask, man, obviously this week's been a little contentious, but we'll get into that a bit later. But how has this like quarantine been treating you, and the fact that you were doing so much around Studio Monk, then all of a sudden you're cooped up inside?
I feel the time to just slow down and just think. I'm really appreciating it, man. I did not see the need for it being so important for me personally. You know what I mean? Blessing in disguise, to say the least. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Taking it day by day. And it's also giving me time to just appreciate just the simple things, man, like the little milestones. There's a lot of things that the people around me have all collectively accomplished. And also, like, they themselves also, like, Story, for example. Story recently got nominated for a Juno.
Yeah.
I mean, that was something beautiful we got to celebrate. My homie Benjamin A.D. in London, England, started to release even more music post the, like, Studio Monk release. So it's, like, just celebrating all of our homies, just keeping the wheel going, And
that's the awesome part about your album Studio Monk, is the community and the collaborations you have throughout the entire record. And you have the likes of River Tiber, you have Jessie Reyez obviously on a track, you got Story, you mentioned Benjamin. It has such a strong community vibe to it. Was that the intention when you were putting it together?
I'm a byproduct of just like a lot of community as a creative. So I come from communities like the Remix Project. I've come from communities like even like my squad in Sauga, So everything I've done has pretty much been in like a band or community format. So it's just natural how the record became something like this. Like for those that have heard ICU, if you were to look back in my catalog, that's kind of I've championed since those days too. Because I had a lot of collaboration with people around the world. The only difference is that there's some songs that I rapped on.
Well, that was actually my first interaction with your work, was seeing you as a battle rapper on Much Music Rap City.
Right.
And I remember, because it was crazy, because I've grown up in Brampton, so I find that when you're in Peel region, and no matter what it is on TV, if you see someone repping Brampton, Sauga, even Caledon, all of a sudden you're like, yo, that's one of my people's on TV right now.
905.
Yeah, 905, man. So I remember when you were like undefeated on that too for like the longest time, right?
It was a nice little streak. It was fun.
Yeah, that's my first interaction with you. And I remember the energy, man, like the energy that you brought to that, and the fact that it was freestyle battling, and again, there was a lot of key opponents that you went up against. And to see now in 2020, you come out with a record like Studio Monk, what has been that growth process like? Because again, it's so easy when you're in the battle to be labeled as a battle MC, and all of a sudden there's expectations with that. But a project like Studio Monk, you do take a bit of a step back, and there's a lot of your production, a lot of your arrangements, a lot of that's being at the forefront.
I finally got the opportunity to be a true student of the music. So I come from a musical family in the sense that my dad's a drummer.
Nice.
His father played trumpet. And my dad's influence in my life really kept me submerged in music. So when I got the chance to do music on my own, my first real instrument was my voice, to be fair, because I was freestyling, And then eventually, church choir introduces me to melodies and harmonies and stuff. And then you meet other people that rap. So then now I'm working in a collective of people. I think the reason why the production part became the new vessel is because that's what I realized I was good at. Is a collection of people into the same room and getting them to find common ground and create without thinking. The whole album are one session songs. So we'd come into the studio, chill and build for like an hour or two before I even played anything. And after that, whoever's in the room would have grounded with each other. So now they're not creating with these walls up. You know what I mean? So then I'll just start making whatever it is, and then that would inspire the room, and whatever we were talking about would naturally become the lyrics in the song. So it was a surreal experience for me because I didn't know what I was doing until I was halfway through it, you know, and then I just kept the process going.
You recorded the album in LA?
All over the world, actually.
All over, okay.
A chunk of it was in LA.
Okay.
At Marshall Montano's crib.
Oh, nice.
Mine, Addy Papa brought us out to out there to do this thing called Riot Club, where he brought down a bunch of Toronto artists to pretty much live with each other in this one house and just to be creative. And it really helped forge a lot of new relationships with people. But that was like the birth of me realizing what I was doing in the studio, because I was the head engineer for the space.
Nice.
Coming into the studio and working. And I was just engineering. I wasn't producing. I wasn't playing any beats. So that was my focus, to like record people. But at the end of the day, everyone would go to bed around 2, and then that's when I'd get creative. So I'd beat my beats at that time to whatever time in the morning. So there'd be plenty of morning where they'd wake up to me either still creating or I'd be passed out to something that I made the night before sleeping. You know? So Know Better, that's actually how that song was made. They walked in, passed out on the beanbag chair, and I woke up to them writing the song.
Wow, really?
Yeah. So that's
crazy,
how Know Better happened. So then a good third of the record was made in LA, and then I came back to Pirates Blend interested in signing me to do a project.
Nice.
I took the opportunity because they were willing to provide a studio space for me to keep working the way I was in LA.
Yeah.
To me, it didn't make sense to take an album budget and I'd spend it all in studio time because of how often I'm in the studio, hence the studio monk. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So they were like, okay, we believe in it, so we'll just get you a space, and then all you got to do is create. So that's how I was able to make the record.
That's like a creator's dream, man. Being told, hey, we'll give you a space, we'll give you a budget, just do your thing. How important was it when you were putting this record together? And considering, again, I see now is a very, if you ask me, is a very quintessential hip hop boom bap style record. How important was it going into Studio Monk that you really, to consider you had a label that really believed in who you were as an artist, to really use that to your advantage and really come up with something that you in your mind knew was going to be such a monumental record in your career?
I didn't even really have the foresight about how big it could be. I was just happy to be with a team that believes in my artistic ability, So Pirates Blend is known for acts like Tribe Called Red, Saul Williams, and Halik Maul, and these are really unique talents, and that's why I was confident to work with them, because I could tell that they weren't influencing the art to trying to make it something else. They always just gave complete freedom to the talent. So when they approached me, I know that I was getting the same opportunity to just be as creative as I want. And I asked for the studio because I was like, to sign a deal is one thing, but if I can't do this, then I'm useless to you.
Yeah. And
they met me halfway. I was like, you know what, you're right, so let's get it. You know what I mean? So big fat shouts to Pirates Blend, because that's a really rare thing, So
that's amazing, man. No, I love that. And I'm glad they took a chance, because the record itself, I haven't come across any review where for Studio Monk where the word classic gets thrown around quite a bit. And again, man, we had this conversation even before when we started recording. And again, I managed to go back to the record today while I was doing some work. And to me, like, I think about my favorite albums of all time, and again, this is just off the top of the head. You got records like The Chronic, 2001, so Dr. Dre's 2. Even, Compton, again, wasn't one of my favorites, but it had that same type of vibe where it was very collaborative. All these artists are coming in and they're being involved, and you can tell that there is some type of party or community happening in the background whenever this is taking place. You think about most recently, people were celebrating 10 years of My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, which will be this year. It's Kanye's record. Very much the same vibe. People are out in Hawaii and they're just rolling in, dropping a verse or adding something to a beat. And then, most recently, 5 years ago, To Pimp a Butterfly with Kendrick's album, right? Like, it's very much a collaborative effort that, just recently songs. Like, and that's fascinating to me, is to see how, again, you knew Thundercat was a part of that process. So when you're seeing like the word classic, be thrown around with this record, how does that make you feel, man?
You know what? It makes me you know what I mean? I don't but as a student of the art form,
yeah,
it makes me happy to know that I'm carrying on tradition. You know what I mean? Like, it's that, people point out that say why it may be classic, to me are important parts to music. For me, making music and just music in general, like some of my favorite producers of all time are like Jay Dilla, but equally as important is like Quincy Jones.
Yeah.
I mean, because of the way that they bring people together. You know what I mean? It's always a collaborative effort. Like you said, a lot of classic albums have that element to it. And sometimes it's not so easy to spot, but if you're really paying attention, it's always the case. Like, look at a Sade record, a lot of people just credit this vocalist, not realizing that Sade is a band.
Yeah. I had that conversation yesterday about Jamiroquai.
Like Jamiroquai. Right? So that's something that I feel that our generation doesn't get a lot of opportunity to do creatively. So I'm just trying to do my piece to keep that in the space of music making,
Well, you mentioned Dilla and Quincy Jones. Growing up in Mississauga, what were some of your influences? Like
from Mississauga or just in general?
In general.
Oh, definitely those two, Stevie Wonder, Bob Marley, you know what I mean? Jackie Matu, if you want to talk about some organs. My dad played me a lot of funk music and soul music. My mother was a devout Christian, so I heard a lot of gospel, Fred Hammond and some Kirk Franklin. But I feel like when I say Quincy Jones and Dilla, those two kind of sum up the worlds that make up me as a producer. You know what I mean? The detail and arrangement will come from the world of Quincy Jones, but the voicing and rhythm and space is what I get from Dilla. You know what I mean? All those church chords and dirty sounding drums and musical sounds.
No, I know, totally, man. And even when you listen to Studio Monk, you can hear, you have a lot of live instrumentation on it. You can hear some of these funk elements to it. You can hear some of these R&B elements, obviously, with the records that you have on there, especially with Jessie Reyez and Sad Face Emojis. It is a very, to me, from a project standpoint, it's very well put together, but you can tell that each song is very intricately placed in regards to the journey that people are on. When it comes to being an artist from Mississauga, and obviously, you and I are kind of in the same age bracket. For me, I always have a soft spot for Canadian hip hop. Sure, Drake is on top of the world, and you gotta love Drake, you gotta respect that. But I'm still someone that grew up listening to Maestro, grew up listening to the Dream Warriors, grew up listening to Ghetto Concept, and having such an appreciation because I was a part of that Much Music generation that would see these records with the mainstream US records and just assume it was all the same thing.
Yeah.
So when were you how would you describe your relationship with Canadian hip hop when you were growing up in Mississauga?
Canadian hip hop is definitely a big contributor to my flavor too. I definitely have to attribute to that, grassroots, obviously Maestro.
Yeah.
I was definitely a student of some Master Plan Radio. Big for me. I loved Project Bounce too.
Oh yeah, shouts to Ritz.
Shouts to them. So I remember listening to Red Life. Red Life was one of my favorites coming up. Obviously, Tough Dumpling Foundation, Man's Them, Bump Some Infinite.
Yeah.
Our generation of the mixtape scene was really influential as far as local music. I remember bumping SARS mixtapes. I remember bumping JD Era mixtapes.
Yeah.
Bumping, our city had a lot of great artists, you know what I mean? So
yeah,
it's kind of cool to see what the new generation looks like, because back then we didn't have the means to do visuals like we do now. And then you got crazy artists like Claremont II, who shoots all of his videos. And
crazy, yeah.
Video, you know what I mean? So
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that because again, you had this era of Toronto hip hop in like the mid '90s to early 2000s, where you had a lot of people that were big in the city, and maybe were making a little bit of noise in the U.S., but no one was on that Drake level. Then all of a sudden, you had the cosign era, which again started with Drake's, I guess, cosign with Lil Wayne. And then from there, The Weeknd came out, and then you had, Tory, and now you're seeing the era that we're in now. But I thought what's interesting about you, man, is you, like, you're not, like, outside of your relationship with Jessie, and even then, like, it's not as overblown as, like, the relationship with, like, Lil Wayne and Drake. Like, you're doing this pretty much, like, on your own, which is kind of cool. Like, it's not like you're leveraging an existing relationship to get what you need to get. Like, a lot of this is really just you showing, improving, and doing the work for itself.
Thanks, man. It's like fat shouts to Jesse's team too, because they're doing it the exact same way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You feel me? So it's like, one thing that Toronto's been good at is the each one teach one. Mm-hmm. So when you start to become like a fabric, a family, best thing you could do for your home is not fish for them, right?
Yeah.
You teach them how to fish. So like, if I'm moving nice, at least you could say that like the peers around me that are doing it are teaching me well.
Yeah, that's dope, man. How did that relationship with Jessie start?
Started with a mutual friend, our good friend Ruiz, and Jessie was looking for somebody that was known for producing with live instruments, and the only person he could think of at the time was me. And he brought me to the studio at a spot at Young and Shooter at the time, and then we've been fam ever since.
That's dope.
We cut like a bunch of records. Some of the first records are on ICU. Like I See was one of the first songs we did. Was also another one of those joints. And then we've just been fam ever since. You know what I mean? So it's like, it was just always about creating with people that you just connect with,
Yeah, and she's obviously been killing it. But even most recently, just even having worked with Eminem, and there was that one viral clip that was going online, during the quarantine with Eminem and Lil Wayne talking about where Jessie's star is going to go. Again, selfishly being from Peel, you can't, you got to be happy for that, man. You got two Peel region homies just straight up taking over the world.
We're just like happy to just contribute to the world of music, man. We're such big fans and nerds of it that we're just happy to be here to do it.
Yeah, no, I love that. What did you appreciate the most when it came to just the process of putting Studio Monk together?
It was the first time ever
I
actually got to take my time making an album.
Ooh, that's good.
Yeah, so this album took like roughly a year and a half, almost 2 years.
Yeah.
So you can only imagine, like a label signs you, and you
they want that output, man.
And they're also still paying for me to be in the space. But yeah, man, they agreed to that in the beginning, and they stuck to their word, and that's how we have Studio Monk. I wasn't rushed. I wasn't rushing to the finish line. I was able to like put the last piece of paint on my piece and like smile at it and be like, okay, it's done.
Yeah. Yeah. How important was that for you? Like to have that time versus some artists that feel that they need to constantly put music out just to stay top of mind when it comes to an audience or to even appease a label?
Because I've put out music before in a rush for different reasons. Sometimes it's to me like an opportunity date-wise. Sometimes it was because like I wanted to be somewhere in the world. I wanted to complete something before I got there. Taking your time gives room for life to happen. And I feel like there's magic in every day that could make a body of work special if you leave room for it. It could be a conversation you have one day. It could be you walk into a store and you hear a sample you would have missed. Or sometimes it's just like being alone with your thoughts without the pressure allows you to appreciate your art differently.
That's good, man. And honestly, I think it's so important because being the friend of a bunch of local artists and the pressure of not only putting together a cohesive project, but being relevant or having an output that's consistent. can be taxing, especially now in the quarantine. You know, people are assuming, okay, well, now everyone's indoors. You know, right now is the time to work. Right now is the time to, you know, increase that output. But I've even talked to a few artists that are having a tough time even just staying motivated because being inside just doesn't allow them to experience a lot. Do you feel the same way?
I've definitely gone through a shift in how I'm creating.
Yeah.
I'm used to bringing people together. I can't do that right now.
yeah, exactly.
It's changed. It's not the same stream of like how I was creating, but like I'm also aware of living is also creating. So the fact that I'm not like pushing buttons doesn't mean I'm not being productive.
Yeah.
So I'm cool with that.
Yeah, no, that's an important way, and I'm glad you put it like that because I think a lot of people assume that with downtime you have to fill it with something. You can't like you can't just take a step back. Like you can't just relax. It's no, you know, the time I relax, I'm missing out on an opportunity, or life is passing me by, or my competitor is doing something and I'm not doing it. Like there's all this pressure, right, to constantly do something.
True, there is. The more and more you do it, you realize that like you're always moving at your pace, anyways.
Yeah.
You know, you're not constantly in a room with this competitor per se. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If you really break it down. And like I'm a firm believer in divine times too. So
yeah,
move at your pace and you'll be blessed, you know?
I wanna ask you about Mississauga, man, because obviously the city has churned out a lot of talent over the last few years, and I would say one of the more prominent names is probably Party Next Door from the OVO camp. And if you ask me, I think the city itself has done a fantastic job in really zeroing in on the arts and culture scene and allowing the artists to have opportunities.
Yeah.
You know, you've performed, you know, at City Hall in the past. Like you've also done some stuff at Celebration Square as well, right?
Yep.
Like, you know, definitely on your home turf. And hey, man, I think as soon as the quarantine's over, I think a Studio Monk concert at Celebration Square is a must. But what's your like? How have you seen the city of Mississauga grow from when you were an artist to what you see now?
I've seen it become like a damn near household name. Like to be able to hear people say Sauga that aren't from Sauga is cool. You know what I mean?
That's how Sauga feels in the nighttime, right?
Not even in Canada. It's Sauga back to me. So it's surreal. Sauga's done a great job. I feel when you come from a city or come from somewhere outside of the city, there's always that you got to prove twice as much that you're bringing has value. You know, I know a lot of people from outside cities can relate, whether it's Ajax, Whitby, you know, Brampton. When you're bringing your work to the city, you really have to show and prove. That's what it was like coming up, you know? So when you got a little bit more pressure to deal with, naturally people can rise to the occasion. And we're just seeing some of that, I guess, you know?
Yeah, what's interesting too is, you know, back a few years ago, people would be easy to claim Toronto over actually being from Sauga. Like Toronto was always the default. No, I'm not from Brampton, I'm from Toronto. But it's like, no, your parents live in Brampton, you grew up in Brampton. Now you're starting to see that shift. Like even in Brampton, Alessia Cara embraces Brampton. Russell Peters obviously embraces Brampton. So it becomes one of those things, you know, Jessie Reyez has mentioned, even most recently had mentioned about how she's, you know, lived in Brampton. So you're starting to see people take that ownership and not be so quick to claim the city because, hey, their city's churning out as much talent as people should expect. When it comes to your identity as an artist, is there anything that your time in Mississauga has taught you that you've been able to kind of take with you when it comes to working on a project or even doing the stuff that you do with Jessie?
Being from Sauga's definitely like taught me resilience. You know, there's more than one way to get something done is the attitude. And I feel like we're always doing that on the road or even in the studio. You know what I mean? It's like problem solving. but in like the most calm demeanor. You know what I mean? That's what I've definitely gained from being from Sauga.
Yeah. Hey, man, it happens at square one, right?
Oh, I used to cipher at square one. I used to from South Common, square one. Man,
that's crazy.
Another talk.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. Just post up at Palladium. Junior, would it feel right if I didn't at least get some perspective from you? It's a contentious time right now. It's not no secret.
Right.
The coronavirus and the quarantine is one thing, but now with the injustice and racism that's, not only taking place in the U.S., but has actually happened here locally too. Most recently with Regis Krasinski-Paquette and her situation.
Right.
A lot of people are speaking out. A lot of people are having conversations that should be had.
Yeah.
And I'm just curious, as an artist who not only is a part of a larger community, but just someone who is in a position of influence. What kind of guidance can you provide somebody right now who's trying to navigate what's going on? And is there anything you recommend that they do when it comes to either education or even speaking out?
This is a really beautiful time to be a great listener. I think that's what we as a people could really put some time and effort and patience into, It's hard to be told the truth sometimes. We all know the phrase, the truth hurts. And the truth isn't always shared with malicious intent. Most of the time, the truth is being shared to bring us to a place of positivity and balance. So if there's anything I could encourage people to do at a time like this, let's be the best listener they possibly could be. Don't just hear somebody say something. Listen. If it matters to you, listen. And from there, it could take you on a journey of understanding new things.
Yeah, no, that's important, man. I'm glad you mentioned that, because I think now more than ever, I think everybody needs to listen. And I've been seeing a lot of posts around people not trying to take what's going on right now and try to use it as a mechanism to put the attention on themselves and try to take away from what's happening by putting their own personal feelings to it. And I think more people just need to follow the advice that you just gave and listen and be able to hear things out.
Yeah, man. It's all going to start with conversations, There's a lot of things happening, but at the root of it all, it's always going to come back to people needing to listen.
We like to theorize here on New Theory Radio because that's the whole premise of the show. And I wanted to just kind of close this out with just asking you, man, like right now, it's no secret. Studio Monk came out. The reviews are in. It felt like a big moment for your career. And I'd love to get your theories on moments, man. And just in regards to how does one capitalize on a moment to its fullest ability? And how? And again, just to kind of use your situation, as an example, understanding what that record has done for you up until this point, and the fact that people are, even to this day, people are still discovering it, people are still checking it out. How are you capitalizing on this moment?
I'm doing my best to make as many memories as possible with the whole experience, from making it to sharing it with the world. You know what I mean? So when people hit me up to say how much they've enjoyed the album, I'm doing my best to make those moments the memories. You know what I mean? Lasting memories. Because that's what we do the art for, man. To give people something to feed their souls, really. You know what I mean? That's it. And to see that it's actually doing its job is a beautiful thing. Man, to keep the pot stirring. You know what I mean?
Have you thought about your follow-up yet?
Nah, you make music every day, man.
Yeah. That's good, man. Keep busy. Well, do you have a favorite record on the album?
I think it's unfair to say that.
I gotta ask you the hard questions, man.
You know what? I'll throw out a random one out there.
All right.
One record that I'm starting to appreciate more and more now than ever.
Yeah.
Is the outro.
Okay. And why is that?
Not a lot of lyrics.
Yeah.
and it still applies every day.
Yeah, that's
You know?
good, man. That's dope.
Yeah, I guess the people want me to say it, so don't give me hesitation, and don't call me your boo, and don't ever tell me what to do. You know,
Yeah.
essentially just like choose whatever action you're taking, really take it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I don't want to be like belittled.
Yeah.
You know?
I like that, man.
That, you know, now I have to stand firm. You know.
Yeah, and it's an important message right now too, man. So I'm glad that's your choice for today. But Junior, we really appreciate having you on. I urge everyone to go check out Studio Monk. You will not be disappointed. Definitely one of the albums of the year. Anything that you're up to, man, that we should know? You were talking earlier. I know you were supposed to be on tour with Billie Eilish and Jessie, but obviously that's been postponed because of Corona. But what are you doing to keep busy, and how can the listeners check out what you're doing and how you're holding up during the quarantine?
You know, they could listen to Studio Monk, but as far as like what they could do to keep up with the music, tune into this show. You know, just tune into like sources where you can be put onto like new things that make you feel good, because I think that's what the world needs right now. I'm just like one thing added to all that. So thank you for having me on the show. I appreciate you sharing the music and Studio Monk. This is the work we need to keep doing. So thank you for including me, my G.
100%, man. And again, we're going to continue to build this community, and we'll definitely have you back, man, especially as a panelist, because I'd love to get your thoughts more on some of the things that are going on in arts and pop culture. But yeah, that's Junior T. Go check out Studio Monk. It is an amazing record. And we are going to take a quick commercial break, and then we'll be back with more New Theory Radio here on News Talk Sauga 960. Welcome back to New Theory Radio, here live on News Talk Sauga 960 AM. I want to give a special thanks to Mastermind and Anupa Mistry, as well as Junior T, for joining us on this week's episode. If you want to connect with New Theory Radio, it is at New Theory Radio across all social platforms. If you want to connect with me, it is at Nav Nanwa on Instagram, at nnanwa on Twitter. Shout outs to at Colorblind Photography _ my baby brother Amit Nanwa for our graphics, and at Dusty Loops for our theme song. And if you missed any part of our show today or any of our earlier broadcasts, don't panic. Just log on to our website at www.sauga960am.ca/podcast and look for and stream our podcast of this show and any of the other programs on Sauga 960 AM. That also includes newtheoryradio.com. And this episode will be available in podcast form on Tuesday. Thank you so much. Continue supporting the movement. Black Lives Matter. And you will hear all of us next time. Peace.